Welcome to part 2. In this part, I want us to think about the idea of modeling. So who is the model that you should hold up for new candidates, new Masons, new Rainbow Girls, new Eastern Star, new whatever it is? Who are the ones we are supposed to model our lives after? And most of the time, we tend to lean towards our current members, our past members. We have all heard stories about that super Mason who was far better than we'll ever hope to be, who died just a few years ago but was so instrumental in the training and education of these older members in our lodges. That's okay. That's a good model, as long as we understand our goal is to match or exceed their abilities. We also look at historical figures all the time. I found out this past summer one of my academic, I won't say idol necessarily, but one of those superstars in my field that I've always looked up to, Santiago Ramon y Cajal. He was this amazing neuroscientist who identified what a neuron is and won the Nobel Prize for it in the early 1900s, 1906 I believe might be it. He's a historical figure. I didn't know that he was a Mason until this summer, but I had always held him up as one of my heroes of my craft outside of Lodge. The historical figures that we all know about, these amazing people who've done such great things for us, outside, inside of Lodge. And then there are scriptural people. I try and hold up Jesus as a model of what I should be. I also realize it's pretty unrealistic because I'm pretty darn fallen and I mess things up all the time. But yet it's still a model which I try to understand. Those models are important. But I also want you to look at yourself as being a model. And if you're a chaplain, you are automatically a model that people are using to assess themselves. Because you put that chain around your neck, you are wearing that jewel. You are a servant of the craft. And if they see service, they see the love of God, the love of their fellow, then you are a good model. We also set standards. And these standards become so important. If we talk about Masonic standards, which not all jurisdictions use the term, I want you to think about what are guidelines. How do we describe what we mean by quality or performance or safety or anything else? How do we define what our standards are? Because you will hear people say Masons have high standards. There are always the jokes about the lodge that met in a hotel for a long time, and someone asks, is it hard to get into the Masons? And the people who work in the hotel say, yeah, that guy's been knocking on the door for years and they still won't let him in. Tylers love that joke as a general rule. Chaplains should as well. It's kind of funny, but that's one of the standards that we face. Who do we let in the door? Who do we let become one of us? How do we describe what we mean by quality of a person? These standards are rules that we have decided on. We can change them. But at the same time, do we ever want to unless we're increasing the quality? But then what are we missing out on if we increase it so much that it's not realistic for anyone ever to meet the standards? We have to recognize that we are only human. And your job as a chaplain is to remind people of that. They're only human and you're not the judge. You're not the final arbiter of all things with the standards. Your job is to help with reconciliation, to see forgiveness when any of us and all of us slip below the standards, whether in a minor way or a major way. How do we reconcile is a part of how we live out our obligations of this beautiful office of chaplaincy. Being a prelate for a commandery means that we get to use beautiful terms. And sometimes I have actually used with great jealousy of my Catholic sisters and brothers who get to absolve people properly. And we joke in my commandery, te absolvo, I absolve you of your sins. It's not something we joke necessarily, but we do discuss that in wonderful ways. We have to forgive. We have to help people forgive themselves as well as a big part of chaplaincy. If we're looking at the standards that we have and the examples that we are holding up, it has to be about brotherly love, it has to be about relief, it has to be about kindness and mercy. That's what Masonry is. And sometimes we look at our individual organizations, our individual lodges or shrines or grottos or whatever they might be, forests, and we are not really thinking about how we should be implementing new standards, better standards, slightly different standards, or when to absolutely not let them change. We have to think through, how do we forward our missions? Why did we join? What are our objectives? And we are leaders of this fraternity. We are helping with the moral standards, these great examples, sometimes pointing out better examples for people. Because if the members don't buy in, then why should any of us adhere to these standards? Why? And Masonry actually has what is called a brand, even if it's not a brand like for a soda or a car. Mason means something to people, and our job is to help set out the standards, remind people what they are, and sometimes get up and say, hey, these are the standards, and some members of this group are not adhering to them. Here's why they should, and here's how we can help reconcile those so that they don't get huffy and storm off, or so that they're not bringing a bad name to the fraternity. Gentleness, kindness, mercy, love. You see recurring themes here.